Ethan always believed that the quiet moments in life were the ones that revealed the most. He just never expected a simple Sunday dinner to expose the cracks in his own relationship. He and Madison had been together for years, living side by side for more than a year, building something he thought was steady. But that night, the air around the table felt different. Madison mocked his mother's cooking with a cold, practiced tone. She snapped at Emma, his younger sister, over something trivial. And when the heirloom plate slipped from her hand and shattered, she didn't apologize. She rolled her eyes as if the family's hurt didn't matter. Ethan felt something inside him shift. Later, when he tried to talk to her, Madison exploded, blaming his family for everything. Then she delivered the words that froze him in place. "Choose. Your family or me." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue or plead or ask her to rethink what she had said. He simply looked at Madison, felt the weight of every moment that had led them here, and answered with a steady calm she didn't expect. "I choose my family." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through the room. Madison's expression twisted from disbelief to fury in seconds. She stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled, shouting that she was going to get her nails done and cool off. But Ethan knew something had already ended. The moment the door closed, he let out a breath he didn't even know he'd been holding. It was a breath of relief, fear, and clarity all mixed together. He walked through the apartment, seeing every trace of her: clothes draped over the chair, shoes scattered by the door, makeup covering the bathroom counter, and realized how much space she had taken up in his life. Space he hadn't questioned until now. He grabbed a set of boxes from the closet. One by one, he folded her clothes, unplugged her hair tools, collected her skincare, her books, everything she kept around as if the apartment belonged only to her. He stacked the boxes by the door, then filled a suitcase with the things she used every day. When the last item was packed, he called an Uber and requested a pickup in 2 hours, sending it to her parents' address. He carried everything down to the lobby, setting it neatly near the front desk. The receptionist gave him a wide-eyed look, but didn't ask. She had probably seen worse, he thought. When Madison finally returned, she found Ethan sitting on the couch, arms crossed, eyes tired but certain. Her gaze darted around in confusion until she noticed the empty shelves, the cleared bathroom counter, the missing clutter that had once been hers. She ran to the lobby, and when she saw her belongings stacked like a barricade, she froze, then erupted. She screamed his name through the stairwell, her voice cracking with disbelief and rage. She called him again and again, but he let the phone ring. When she burst back into the apartment, she was crying, shaking, begging him to talk. Ethan stood his ground. "You gave me a choice," he said. "I made it." Madison accused him of abandoning her. She said he was overreacting, that she didn't mean it, that his family had turned him against her. Her words fired out in every direction, desperate to land somewhere. But there was nothing left for them to hit. For the first time, Ethan felt the noise of the relationship fall away, leaving only the truth he'd ignored for years. Madison continued sobbing, packing, grabbing at her hair, calling it unfair, calling him cruel. But Ethan stayed silent. Eventually, she ran out of words. She left with the Uber driver, who had been waiting awkwardly beside her pile of belongings. When the door closed behind her, Ethan didn't feel triumphant. He just felt free. The first phone call came less than an hour after Madison left her parents' house. Ethan didn't answer. Then her mother called, then her father, then her older brother, each one demanding an explanation, accusing him of humiliating her, insisting he had overreacted. Ethan stayed calm and sent a single screenshot in response, the ultimatum: "Choose your family or me." After that, the calls went silent. For a moment, he thought the worst was behind him. He was wrong. The next morning, Madison showed up at his office building. She clutched her stomach, crying loudly in the lobby, claiming she was pregnant and needed to speak to him immediately. Security escorted her out after Ethan confirmed there was no pregnancy and that she wasn't allowed inside. That night, at 2 a.m, someone tried the lock on his apartment door. Ethan sat up, heart pounding, and checked the peephole. Madison was hunched over the doorknob, whispering angrily, jiggling the handle as if she could force it open. When he spoke through the door, she jumped, then began pounding on it with her fists, begging, apologizing, threatening, all in one breath. He called security again. They arrived just as she tried to shoulder the door open. She screamed when they pulled her away, shouting that he owed her a conversation. The next day, Emma called Ethan, voice shaking. Madison had tracked her down at a coffee shop and unloaded a torrent of accusations, calling her manipulative, calling her the reason for the breakup, calling her names so vile that customers had stepped in to defend the teenager. Emma had left in tears. Ethan felt something inside him snap. Still, Madison wasn't done. 2 days later, a glitter bomb arrived at Ethan's office. It exploded the moment he lifted the lid, coating his keyboard, chair, and carpet in an explosion of rainbow chaos. His coworkers stared. He just sighed. Then the messages started from unknown numbers. Fake accounts tagging him in posts. Emails from strangers repeating bizarre rumors. And then the most surreal moment. His ex-girlfriend texted him. "Why is Madison telling people you stalked me after we broke up?" Ethan felt the exhaustion hit all at once. Madison was no longer reacting emotionally. She was escalating with intention. Every day became a new episode of chaos. Every boundary he set, she pushed harder. Every silence he gave her, she filled with noise. The Madison he had known, the woman he once believed was simply emotional, simply sensitive, simply insecure, was gone. In her place was someone fueled by obsession, humiliation, and revenge. Ethan started documenting everything. Timestamps, messages, video clips, emails, security reports. He didn't know yet what he would need it for. He only knew one thing. Whatever this was becoming, it wasn't going to stop on its own. The rumors started quietly, almost like background noise. A neighbor mentioned something odd to Ethan in the elevator. Another gave him a strange look as he checked his mail. Then someone sent him a screenshot from the community Facebook group, posts written by Madison's family implying he had explosive anger issues and drove their daughter into emotional collapse. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't even comment. He simply saved every screenshot. Meanwhile, Madison's father, who owned a small landscaping business, suddenly received hundreds of one-star reviews. People mocked him online, cursed at him, trashed his company's name. But Ethan noticed something strange. The language of the reviews matched Madison's texting style, right down to her punctuation quirks. It became painfully clear she was trying to manipulate him, using her own father's reputation as leverage, hoping Ethan would cave and take her back. He didn't. That was when Madison decided to escalate publicly. A week later, Ethan woke to a flood of messages from mutual friends. "Are you okay? You need to see this. She's totally lost it." Then he saw the photos. Madison had thrown a party the night before. A big one. She called it the Freedom Party, and the theme was simple: expose Ethan to everyone. She had decorated her parents' living room with printed screenshots, many edited, many fabricated, hung like evidence in a conspiracy board. She had even made a PowerPoint titled "The Truth About Ethan," complete with dramatic music and a slideshow of distorted stories. Friends who attended later said she stood in front of the TV like a prosecutor, pointing to each slide with a wine glass in hand. She claimed he manipulated her. She claimed he cheated. She claimed he gaslit her, stole from her, sabotaged her job, and ruined her chance at becoming an influencer. She even insisted he used emotional witchcraft, which made absolutely no sense to anyone and caused half the room to burst out laughing. At first, the guests were polite, uncomfortable trying to hear her out. But as she continued, her stories became so contradictory that people began to push back. One friend asked why a screenshot timestamp didn't match her story. Another pointed out that the edited messages looked fake. A third asked why she was smiling in photos she claimed were taken during a traumatic period. Madison snapped. Her voice rose, cracking from the strain. She accused everyone in the room of taking Ethan's side. She called them traitors, cowards, idiots. When someone suggested she take a breath, she threw her wine glass at the floor, screaming that nobody understood her pain. The room fell silent. Moments later, Madison stormed out of her own party, slamming the front door behind her, leaving everyone stunned in the living room surrounded by her wall of fabricated evidence. Ethan didn't attend, but he didn't need to. The witnesses told him everything. And for the first time since the breakup, he realized something important. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't confusion. This was a complete unraveling. It happened on a Thursday night, just after Ethan returned from work. He tossed his keys on the counter, opened a can of sparkling water, and checked the notifications from his door camera. At first, he thought the thumbnail was a glitch. But when he tapped the video, his stomach dropped. Madison was standing outside his apartment door with 3 of her cousins, all dressed in hoodies, all looking around like they were planning a heist. She pointed at the lock, whispered something, and one of the cousins pulled out what looked like a cheap locksmith kit from a hardware store. Ethan watched in disbelief as they knelt down and actually tried to pick the lock to his front door. Then Madison leaned forward, pounding on the door and yelling for him to stop hiding. A few minutes later, building security rushed down the hall. One guard announced that Madison was already on the building. No entry list. She started screaming at them, claiming Ethan had stolen her property, that she had legal rights to the apartment, that she was retrieving marital assets. Ethan felt a bizarre mix of fear and exhaustion wash over him. He watched from behind the peephole as the guards escorted all 4 of them to the elevator, while Madison shouted that she would take everything he owned. The building filed an official report. Ethan added it to the growing folder of evidence on his laptop. He thought this might finally be the end of her escalation. But the next morning, he received an email from a law firm he'd never heard of. Subject line: Notice of civil complaint, Madison Cole versus Ethan Ward. He opened it and almost laughed from disbelief. Madison had filed a lawsuit accusing him of emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and withholding joint property. They had never lived in a shared ownership situation. They weren't married. They didn't share accounts. One of the claims stated that Ethan owed her money for a YouTube channel revenue split. He didn't even have a YouTube channel. Still, he hired an attorney who skimmed the documents and shook his head. "This won't hold up," the attorney said. "But we'll go through the motions." At the mediation hearing, Madison arrived dramatically late, wearing sunglasses indoors and carrying a thick binder labeled evidence. Halfway through the meeting, she made a mistake that ended everything. While describing her claims, she proudly announced that she had recorded 6 months of their conversations to prove emotional neglect. Ethan's attorney slowly raised a hand. "Are you saying you recorded him without his consent inside his private residence?" Madison nodded, thinking she'd made a winning point. But the mediator froze. In their state, secret recordings in a private home were illegal unless both parties consented. By admitting it out loud, Madison had incriminated herself. Her attorney put his face in his hands. 10 minutes later, the mediation was over. The case collapsed. Ethan's lawyer filed a counterclaim for unlawful surveillance. Madison's lawyer withdrew from representing her. By the time Ethan walked out of the building, he finally understood something he hadn't seen clearly before. Madison wasn't just lashing out. She was spiraling in a way that no logic, no boundary, no conversation could stop. It started subtly, almost quietly, as if Madison had decided to shift strategies rather than intensity. For nearly a week, Ethan heard nothing from her. No texts, no calls, no midnight pounding at his door. He allowed himself to hope she had finally burned out. He should have known better. One morning, his coworker Garrett slid into the seat next to him in the break room with a strange expression. "So, Madison added me on Instagram," he said. Ethan looked up, confused. Garrett continued. "She said she just wanted someone to talk to, said she felt unsafe, said you were dangerous." Ethan felt his jaw tighten, but Garrett held up a hand. "I didn't believe her, but I kept watching because something felt off." Over the next few days, Madison escalated her friendliness toward Garrett. She sent long messages late at night, asking personal questions, complimenting him excessively, then subtly fishing for information about Ethan, his schedule, his mood, his routines. Garrett didn't respond beyond short, neutral replies. But Madison interpreted silence as invitation. She showed up outside the office one afternoon wearing a dress like she was going on a date, waving at Garrett as if they'd planned to meet. He backed away immediately. Madison insisted she just wanted to grab lunch, but when he declined, she accused him of leading her on. Security escorted her off the premises again. Ethan thought that was the end of that chapter. It was. Later that evening, Garrett called him. "She's messaging me on LinkedIn now," he said, sounding exhausted. "And I think you should see this." He sent screenshots of the messages. Madison was describing Ethan as a dangerous narcissist, claiming she needed Garrett's help to expose him, and even suggesting the two of them should meet in secret. Ethan rubbed his face in disbelief. The obsession wasn't fading. It was mutating. 2 days later, another unexpected person reached out, Lily, one of Madison's closest friends. She asked to meet Ethan in person, saying it was important. When they sat down at a quiet cafe, she looked exhausted, guilty, and deeply worried. "I can't keep covering for her," Lily said. "Madison is doing things that are not okay." Ethan stayed silent, letting her speak. Lily took a shaky breath. "First, she hired a private investigator to follow you." Ethan blinked. Lily continued, "But he quit after 2 days. He said you were too boring to track and refunded her money." Ethan stared at the table, half relieved, half horrified. "Second," she said, lowering her voice, "she created fake dating profiles using your photos. She's been messaging random women pretending to be you, hoping someone would accuse you publicly." Ethan felt his stomach twist. "And third," Lily hesitated, "she asked me to help her put a tracking device under your car." Ethan sat completely still. For a long moment, Lily didn't speak. "I told her no," she finally said. "That's when I realized she wasn't just hurting. She was gone. Something snapped in her." Ethan appreciated the honesty, but the fear began to settle deeper in his bones. He thanked Lily, saved every message she showed him, and went home with a certainty he had been avoiding for weeks. This wasn't going to stop on its own. It wasn't going to fade. It wasn't going to burn out. So he gathered his folder of evidence: photos, screenshots, emails, security footage, statements, timestamps. And the next morning, he filed for a restraining order. For the first time since the breakup, Ethan felt a sense of control returning. Not safety, not peace, but the first step toward it. The restraining order was approved faster than Ethan expected. A court officer delivered it to Madison's parents, home early in the morning, and the moment she signed for it, the unraveling that had been happening quietly in the background exploded into full view. Within an hour, Madison posted a frantic stream of messages on social media, claiming Ethan was silencing her, that he was afraid of the truth, that she was being legally hunted. Ethan didn't respond. He simply forwarded the screenshots to his attorney and went about his day. By evening, Madison showed up at the edge of his apartment property line, far enough to avoid violating the order, but close enough that security had to intervene again. She paced back and forth, shouting that he couldn't erase her, that she would never stop telling the world who he really was. Security recorded everything. The next day, there was another shift. Her parents reached out to Ethan unexpectedly. They asked to meet in person, sounding drained and older than he remembered. When Ethan arrived at the cafe, Madison's mother looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her father seemed defeated, staring into his coffee as if searching for answers he couldn't find. "We had no idea it had gotten this bad," her mother said quietly. "We thought she was having a rough breakup. We didn't know." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Her father sighed deeply. "We're sorry, truly, for everything she's done." They explained that Madison had been refusing help, refusing therapy, refusing medication, insisting everyone was lying to her. She was convinced Ethan was orchestrating some massive plot against her, as if the entire world was participating in a conspiracy built out of her own fantasies. Ethan listened silently. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want apologies. He just wanted peace. But the situation was far from over. Just 2 days later, Madison released what she called the Ethan Files, a 47-page manifesto posted across every platform she could access. It was a chaotic mix of accusations, diary entries, altered screenshots, and bizarre theories about Ethan controlling her life through psychological manipulation grids. Most people who read it didn't take it seriously. Some thought it was satire. Others mocked the disjointed logic, the contradictions, the pages of red ink diagrams that looked like they belonged in a crime documentary about conspiracy theorists. Within hours, it became a meme. People stitched it, reacted to it, parodied it. Madison tried to defend the document, but the more she spoke, the more unhinged she sounded. Her parents finally stepped in. They drove her to a treatment center after she had what they described as a severe, disoriented episode, wandering outside at night claiming she needed to collect evidence from streetlights. Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He didn't even feel relief, not immediately. What he felt was a slow, quiet exhale of exhaustion that had been trapped in his body for months. He began therapy, hopping to untangle the knots of fear and stress that had built up. He started reconnecting with Emma, with his parents, with friends who had stepped back during the chaos. Life didn't snap back to normal. It returned gradually, day by day, like sunlight reappearing after weeks of storms. Eventually, Ethan began dadding again, carefully, calmly, with clarity he didn't have before. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something simple and steady settling back into his life. Peace. Months later, Ethan walked through a quiet morning feeling lighter than he thought possible. The chaos that once pressed in from every direction had finally thinned into something distant, something that no longer defined him. He still carried lessons from the ordeal, but they no longer felt like open wounds. They were simply reminders of how deeply someone can lose themselves and how necessary boundaries can be. Madison remained in treatment, and her parents sent occasional updates, short, gentle messages saying she was stabilizing slowly. Ethan wished her well in silence, hoping she would find the help she had resisted for so long. He focused on rebuilding his life with steady intention, choosing people who communicated honestly and relationships grounded in mutual respect rather than chaos. When he looked back, he didn't see a story about villains or victims. He saw a long, complicated chapter finally closing, making space for a quieter one to begin. One evening, as he sat on his balcony watching the last of the sunlight settle over the city, he felt a clarity he hadn't known in years. The storm had passed, and in its wake, he found room to breathe, room to grow, and room to move forward without fear.